Good morning. This is week 10 of the history of fashion in the long 19th century, and today I'd like to talk with you about children's clothes. As you probably know by now, children's fashion followed the same principles as women's fashion, and as we have seen recently, men's fashion as well. So in terms of styles, we basically have the same styles, so the neoclassical, the romantic, the Victorian, even some versions of crinolines and bustles, and then the Belle Epoque. So as you will see in the fashion plates in a minute, you have elements of the same styles in the elevated waistlines, in the shapes of sleeves, in the shapes of headwear. This is especially visible in girls' dresses because generally, historically, children's clothes followed the same styles and the same shapes as adult clothes. Of course, we are talking about rich families, the families in which children could wear more formal clothes. They also participated in some semi-formal occasions. So what we have to consider are the levels of formality as well. And just as with everyone, there would be 3 levels of formality, so the undress, the half dress and the full dress. But like what you've seen in, in reference to men's fashions, not all of these levels would be applicable to children. With men, as you remember, the undress was practically never worn because men, by definition, the vast majority of men, did not stay at home during the day, so they put on their day clothes and went to work or to do other things outside. With children, the full dress is very rarely used because children, as a rule, with perhaps the exception of the older teenagers just before they were accepted into the adult society, children in general did not participate in any formalized forms of entertainment and social gatherings in the evening. So what we will have are versions of undress, so very informal, comfortable clothes that children would use at home, and the semi-formal half dress, which would be used for the occasions requiring a bit more formality, such as going to church or visiting, usually within the family circle, but visiting would be quite important and probably the most formal kind of social interaction that the children would be involved in. In many rich families, children would also be dressed up in their best clothes for an afternoon meal, usually called the tea with the parents. You have to remember that for most of the 19th century, it was absolutely common for children in the rich families to be spending most of the day with the servants. They would have specialized servants, the most important of them being the nanny, or the nurse, as the official job title said. But there would be other helpers such as nursery maids, and in case of small babies you might even have a wet nurse, that is a specialized servant who would breastfeed the babies with her own breast milk. Despite all the Victorian values, in wealthy families children did not see their parents or even their mothers all the time. They would be normally brought to the presence of their parents in the afternoon for afternoon tea. They might be involved in some sort of polite conversation with the parents, talk about their day, talk about whatever they learned, of course, children from the age of around 7 would have some sort of tutor, or even more often a governess. So that's the social reality of children's lives, and let's now talk a little bit about the clothes themselves. So beside the concern with the wealth of the family, so of course we are talking about the families who could afford special clothes to be made for children and not just wear any kind of, I don't know, old clothes, hand-me-downs or whatever. The distinction would be between the levels of formality, so the undress and the half dress, so the morning dress and the day dress basically, and also the age of the children would matter. So there would be special clothes for babies, and then clothes for boys and girls, so the gender of the child would also matter very much. Clothes for boys and girls were different from a certain age, from more or less the age when the child was toilet trained. Before that, for the babies, the clothes were generally not gendered. So little boys and little girls would wear identical clothes, very often the same clothes. They would be passed within the family from one child to another. You have to remember, in the 19th century, the average number of children per family would be between 5 and 6. So there would be many children in the family, and of course nobody would expect each child to be equipped with their own separate set of clothes, especially when they were babies and they were growing quite quickly. So the baby clothes would, to the modern eye, look like girls' clothes nowadays, because both little boys and little girls, babies and toddlers, before they could walk and before, importantly, they were toilet trained and they stopped using diapers, they would be wearing some kind of dresses or tunics. If we look at images of children, for example, in portraiture, you will see very many girls, but some of these girls might indeed be little boys in baby clothes. So that's something quite important and characteristic. Only towards the very end of the 19th century, but it's really the question of the 20th century, when we have gendered clothes practically from the moment of birth, so that clothes for boys and girls differ right from the beginning. It doesn't happen in the 19th century. It never happened until the 20th century. Another thing which is quite often misunderstood are the color codes. So nowadays the consensus is that pink is a girl's color and blue, light blue, is a boy's color. They didn't have such notions in the 19th century. There might be wearing any kind of color. Usually little children wore light colors, beige or white, sometimes with colorful sashes, but they were not gendered again. And if anything, pink, being a warm, more bright and vibrant color, was more associated with boys and blue with girls. So it's purely cultural. It has nothing to do with any sort of, I don't know, natural perception of the difference between boys and girls. So what we have are those tunics. They were a kind of undress, really, because little children spent most of the time at home and were rarely the participants of family gatherings. There is, however, one exception. There is a form of, I would say, more formal dress for babies. The kind of dress that was sometimes used for christening, so for the baptism ceremony at church, or sometimes for more formal family occasions, especially the kind of first visit of the family members to a new mother. Then, of course, the woman would display the baby to the relatives, and there was a special kind of garment called the long gown. The long gown was like a dress for a baby, usually white, and usually worn with some sort of decorative lace-trimmed or embroidered cap. But the length of this gown was much longer than the baby's legs. So, of course, this was used for small babies, not even toddlers. So they would be carried all the time by their mothers or other members of the household. So they wouldn't, their legs wouldn't get tangled in the fabric. But when a woman was sitting and carrying the baby on her knees, the lower part of the long gown would kind of flow down to the floor in a decorative way. So we have a small body of the baby and then a kind of long flowing, usually white gown. This is the most formal garment for babies. You may recall or Google it, the stories of the births in the modern royal family, in the current royal family, especially the christening celebrations. Sometimes they use historical clothes held in the family for many generations, and these clothes were not gendered. So I remember when little son of Prince William was baptized, I guess they used the long gown of the eldest daughter of Queen Victoria, the Princess Royal, later Empress Vicky. There was some grumbling in the media, like why did they use a girl's dress for a boy? But it really derives from ignorance, because this is not a girl's dress, this is a baby dress. And in the 19th century, nobody expected little babies to wear gendered clothes. So with all the preoccupation of the Victorians with gender, this does not apply to little babies. And even in many families, the first kind of leggings that a little boy got was a kind of important moment, perhaps not amounting to a full-blown ceremony, but an important moment within the family, which was sometimes called the breeching. So the first breeches, the first leggings or trousers that were given to the boy. This was really like the first step in the socialization of the boy to masculinity. And this happened at different times in different families. This could be earlier for the eldest son in the family, so for the future heir of the family name. Then it could be around the age of 4, perhaps. sometimes as late as 6, especially if it was a younger brother coming after some sisters. So this would really require a new set of clothes to be made for the boy. Then, or the mother just liked girlish clothes more than boyish clothes, and in the 19th century still, in rich families, children were sometimes used as fashionable accessories. Yes, to put it bluntly. So, especially during the day when the mother went for a walk or a drive in the carriage in the park, she might choose usually one of her children, of her many children, to accompany her, and this child would be dressed up in more formal clothes, and this would be really part of the socialization process. So, teaching the manners and social graces rather than just allowing the child to develop naturally. It was also quite popular for pregnant women to make or to decorate the baby clothes themselves. This was something very traditional to be done by expectant mothers. On the other hand, the Victorians had no notion of maternity clothes. We'll talk about it probably during some later week, but these women were pregnant all the time, and we hardly ever see any garments that would suggest maternity or pregnancy. So that's what we have. And then the clothes for girls and boys would take separate routes, and they would continue until really the boys and girls were fully socialized to adult fashions. As you will see in a moment when we start looking at the fashion plates, there are some stylistic differences between the neoclassical period and the later period, so from the Romantic period onwards. But from the Romantic period onwards, the clothes of little girls are short, so the skirts are short, and they are gradually lengthened as the girls grow. So the younger the girl, the shorter the dress. They would of course be wearing stockings, so they wouldn't be cold. They might even wear long drawers or the pantalettes, and in case of little girls, especially in the Romantic period, it was perfectly normal for the pantalettes to be seen from beneath the skirt. In the neoclassical period, it's a little different, because then the girls' clothes are miniature versions of adult clothes with the elevated waistlines, with all those neoclassical elements. You'll see it in a little moment. So otherwise, throughout the 19th century, we have very similar shapes to adult dresses. So the shape of the skirt, the shape of the sleeves, the shape of the headwear. The little girls who accompanied their mothers during the day would learn how to be elegantly attired. They would also have similar accessories to their mothers. So little gloves, and first and foremost little hats and bonnets of the same shape as adult women. In the Victorian period, this would continue. So the only visible difference between girls' dresses and women's dresses is the length of the skirt, and also the hair arrangements. Not so much the bonnets, because the bonnets would be very similar, but the hair arrangements. It is commonly accepted that young girls didn't have very elaborate hairstyles and normally would wear their hair long. And the women, with the exception, as you remember, of a relatively short period when the front of the hair would be displayed in the form of the ringlets, otherwise women would wear their hair piled up or in some sort of more elaborate coiffure. Not so much with girls. Girls were expected to wear simple hairstyles. It might be a simple braid or a simple coil of hair, but even wearing the hair long and loose, perhaps curled a little for more formal occasions, this is absolutely typical and expected. So for a girl, an important moment in her life when she was, let's say, accepted into a more adult society came when she was a teenager. Usually, again, it was not a set moment, usually around the time of puberty. So between the ages of, let's say, 14 and 16, this was the moment when the girl would get her first full-length skirt or dress, and she would wear her hair up. So the dress goes down and the hair go up. This was the mark that the woman was now treated as a young, that the girl was now treated as a young woman. She would accompany her mother during some social obligations, like the calls, so the short social visits to acquaintances, and she could be expected to enter the marriage market. So she might be expected to start looking for a future husband, or rather the family would perhaps start looking for an appropriate future husband. As far as the styles go, as I said, in the Victorian period, the dresses follow the same shapes, the same decorations. So when flounces are fashionable, the dresses have the flounces. When the crinolines are fashionable, the formal day dresses for girls might have crinolines. They would be short, so short crinoline dresses. Yes, this happens in the later 50s and in the 60s. So you have fashion plates and portraits showing little girls wearing fashionable dresses. We have a portrait of the youngest daughter of Queen Victoria, Princess Beatrice, by Winterhalter. I hope you know Winterhalter already. And dressed in what looks like a little crinoline, and some fashion plates from the late 50s and early 60s, including children, because the fashion plates sometimes show women with children. And the children are dressed in those kinds of semi-formal day clothes. And we have little girls wearing crinolines. So yes, here we have some examples. If you are wondering why the fashion plates from 1863 are all black and white, these are Polish fashion plates, and the women are wearing half mourning, so they are wearing the distinctive clothes of somebody who's honoring the dead. And this is after the January uprising, so this was a patriotic thing to do. For the children, this would mean white or grey clothes with black trimmings sometimes. So this is why you see them then. Then in the Bustle period we have formal dresses for girls, including little bustles. or the little natural form dresses. So there is some gathering at the back. It might not be a full bustle, although it does happen, but rarely. Or narrow, slim, this column-like dresses for little girls, but they of course do not wear the corset. Corsets for waist training were not worn before the teenage years, so they might even be like 12, but if they were younger, they might wear the corset to strengthen the spine, so to keep the straight posture. Then in the Belle Epoque, teenagers followed the fashions of women, with the exception of the girls' clothes being shorter, but we have really for the first time clothes designed for girls being semi-formal and not following the same fashions, the same shapes and styles as women's dresses. So we have some things like the lowered waistline in the Belle Epoque, but otherwise these garments are not waisted. They are still shorter, but they are more distinctly childlike than the clothes worn by adult women. So we really enter the modern treatment of girls' dresses with the end of the 19th century in the Edwardian period, and we continue in a moment.